We're going to model some reflection because we ask the children to do it a lot, and it's something that teachers feel they don't have a lot of time to do. So because we have made the time to do it, we're going to think about the things that we could have changed, things we could have done differently, and I suppose have it inform our teaching and how we would do things differently next time. Okay, so let's just talk about a few of the teaching points that we think that we could have changed. There were things... one of the things that we could have done was we noticed that Sarah, our student teacher, was pointing to words as the children were reading, and it probably would have been a really good teaching point to have her say to them, can you show me that you're pointing to the words as you're reading? And for some kids, they actually don't need that anymore. So that would be something that we could focus on a little bit differently. Another thing that other people pointed out to us too was the idea of probably preparing our materials better for the children doing the interactive writing and using that as a chance to focus on their handwriting as well. So while the point was for them to construct together, it's a great time for them to say, oh, well, can they give each other feedback? Is that the way the A starts? Where does the A start again? You know, and have a chat about those kinds of things. So as Cheryl was saying to us, do things, you know, do the two things rather than doing one thing instead of doing it twice. Get it all done in the one
and
go.
on that paper, instead of having just the line, if we have the dotted thirds, and somehow stuck all of that onto the butcher paper, that would follow through. So that nice connection from what you do in the classroom follows through to here we're doing the writing.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely think about that for next time and for next year.
Cheryl, jump in.
And another one thinking about that was the idea of what we called it. We ended up calling the text type procedural text. And we looked at various resources. One was the Targeting Textbook. One was Beverly Darawenka exploring how texts work. We looked at First Steps and then thinking back about ESL and the mainstream. But when I thought further about it, we
were using the wrong word.
I think.
We were using language that we knew that kids were familiar with and our staff were familiar with. But when we looked at the idea of multimodal kinds of things...
It's actually instructional text. Because when we brought up the sign, the stop sign...
The exit sign...
those are instructing someone, not so much...
Not a process. Giving
a
us
procedure.
The process,
And so what that really highlighted to me, and again, I remember we had this book open, the First Steps book was open when we were doing the planning, and I was on the procedure and looking at the recipes, how to do something, how to make something, how to play a game. Those are all procedures. But then we got into the multimodal side of things, wanted to bring in that aspect, but almost went to a higher text type as...
It actually broadened it.
But we didn't inform the children of that. And I don't think we
really knew.
No. So it wasn't only until watching that again that I thought, oh, we need to rethink what we're going to call these text types. And I've constantly been hitting that point.
Because we're no longer just looking at writing. Because we are looking at visual text and looking at the idea of multimodal, it actually has broadened things a lot further. It's not just your recipe and not just your game instructions. There's lots of different things that we can look at, and they can all be tied together in a particular way. So the language is important.
The language is very important, and we need to decide then as staff what we are going to call it. And I've said this before too, because I might call it persuasive, someone else might call it argumentative or discussion or whatever it is. And we need to be all on board and put that as part of our language document and have those text types defined and what they're going to be called. And I think this really hit home for me. So
I think that leads on to what I was talking about too with the kids, because we probably need to have a better idea of what we're calling things. So if we're going to call it instructional text, and come up with all of the other language that comes with it. Yeah. So we can say, some of you might have thought about this. And that's what I was thinking when I was talking to the kids, because often I was speaking to them like they were deaf, rather than, instead of looking for different phrasing, I would say the same thing 3 times, hoping that they would understand it. Whereas I should have been thinking to myself, okay, here are some instructions, here are some words I'm going to have some difficulty with. How can I say that in 3 different ways, rather than just saying it again and saying it a little bit louder? So, it is that idea of it's semantics, but it's important.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I think so too. Yeah. Well, I know one thing that I noticed was that I constantly repeat.
We both did.
What the children said.
Yeah.
So
I think we started off with it because we thought that maybe the video couldn't hear it. Well, I remember thinking about that consciously, but then we both do it naturally anyway.
Yeah,
So
I know I
think
do
we
it, and
actually
I've
do
noticed
do
it now in myself.
It's kind of like that second clarification, which is fine probably with some of the kids that we're working with, because I might need to hear it a second time. But I wonder if we do it with older kids too, who probably get annoyed by that.
And the other thing I think is sometimes I do it because I know that the child's voice is quiet and that the child on the other side of the room can't hear it. But instead of me saying, "Did you hear that?" and having the child repeat what they just said, I do it for them. And
but in
so
some
I
ways
need
too,
to
when you think
rethink
about it,
when you've got often.
When you've got someone who doesn't have any auditory processing, that's probably having that repeating gives them more time too. So in some ways, it's not a bad thing, because some kids actually need
Maybe
more time, but we might not have to do it as often as we do right now.
Decrease how much we do it. The other thing for me that was really highlighted in these videos is the importance of the collaboration and that time that we spent together, and that planning time and the process that we went through and the back and forth ideas and sharing that we had. That was incredibly important to me, and I really hope that that's highlighted, because as an ESL specialist, as a literacy specialist, language, I'm only in your room 4 days a week, 4 times a week rather. So for 50 minutes?
50 minutes.
So for 50-minute lessons, that's not a lot of time to cover all of that language aspect. So it's that importance of that, the collaboration between the language specialist and the homeroom
make sure
teacher.
that they're in the front of my head, because I'm always spending time with you. So it makes sure that I'm thinking about it for the rest of the time that I'm in there.
That's
well.
right.
The other thing though that I think it does is, because we do bounce off one another quite well, you know, I feel like we're catering for a lot more needs doing that, because if I haven't explained it right, you can jump in and explain it, you know, in a different way too. But I also think it just makes for a much more energetic classroom.
Oh, for
too.
sure. And that's the best part of being in the classroom together.
Yeah.
And it's, again, though, that behind the scenes stuff that happened. And I think that that's crucial to spend a lot of time on. And schools are busy places. We don't have a lot of time for that. So the idea, you know, we make time. We also do a lot of stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
But again, it's the relationship that we've developed. And that takes a while to build it up.
And I think sometimes it takes personality, like, you know, different personality. You have to know that you've got people who are going to be able to work well together like that. But for me, who's always team taught and isn't team teaching this year, you know, I've kind of felt a little bit lonely in the classroom. So to have someone else in there I think has lifted my game a lot more, and I think it's made it much more engaging for the children. And I think, you know, working with 5-year-olds, it's 50% education, it's 50% acting sometimes too.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes by having you in there, you know, we provide a bit of a show for them, and it keeps them engaged and keeps everyone on track. So
I think so too. When I watched the Jack-o'-lantern one again, I realized how important that pre-teaching we did, which wasn't on the video, but we had spent a lot of time with the children looking at prepositions of location. That comes across in the planning that we had, but when you actually watched what those kids did, there was a whole lesson ahead of time on these prepositions of location. And then I took just the ESL children aside and did some interactive writing using Realia. So I had a box in a chair. Where's the box? On the chair, under the chair, on the right hand side and the left hand side. And I realized that when they were doing all of that and listening to those instructions, how much of that they needed that pre-teaching.
And I wonder if we could have even taken that further and got the kids involved. Like, I think we did in a very implicit sense, but it came out when they were giving us feedback about those Jack-o'-lantern instructions, and some of their instructions were much better than ours.
Yeah.
So to have brainstormed with them before all the different ways they could say certain things probably would have made life a little bit easier for them.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point. We could have practiced it in small groups together and not...
Use what they already did.
And use that, and then start it as the whole class,
Yeah.
and then the result we would have gotten. I mean, I think they did
and then
a really
to do that Jack-o'-lantern again using instructions that they gave would
did.
be interesting, or to do something similar with similar instructions and to use the language that they give us, and to see, you know, the difference in terms of what products they came out with.
I think the children did an incredible job with that task, because I do think it was quite difficult to get it. And I forget who had it, but a couple of them had things just all over the place. So that was, to us, that informed us straight away, okay, there's a mismatch here.
Yeah.
But we didn't do the next step.
Yeah.
And that's where, we should have gone back to that, even with it was just with the small group that we knew. The result was right there.
Yeah.
Who had it, who didn't have it. Perhaps they need it as well, some more practice with prepositions of location.
Yeah.
And we were just thinking, oh, well, it's the ESL kids that are going to have a hard time. But maybe
No.
it was other ones.
I
So
think
it's
there were. I think there
Yeah.
were a few other kids who had issues with that, and it could have been just a whole other way to, I suppose, support the program in terms of just saying, okay, well, that's another bit that we need to look at. We need to look at all those prepositions, and it doesn't need to have anything to do with the group of lessons we're doing
No.
for this, but and things like those barrier games and everything would have been a great way to do that.
So that's something that we can add on for
Mm.
next year, or if anyone takes it on. For me, it was doing the video, working with Cheryl. We worked together anyway, but having, I suppose, a set task that we needed to do. Not that we don't have set tasks, but you know what I mean. But I guess knowing that this was going to be the result of it. But for me now, watching it and having done this after having worked as a teacher for more than 10 years, it's really invigorating and refreshing
But it's
to
also
look at it and
how-
to learn.
When do you ever get
And-
the opportunity to watch yourself teaching
Rarely.
and looking at all the things that you would change or alter or embellish, or those that and I think particularly people tend to think that you need less critical feedback the longer that you've been teaching, where in some ways I think you can get kind of stale and get used to doing a few things. So in order to get that feedback and for us to sit down and watch that and go, oh my God, I would do that differently, or I didn't
I
realise
wouldn't
that
say
this is what
that.
the kids are seeing, or all of those kinds of things is a fantastic opportunity. So
I think so too. So for me, I mean, that's the same thing that I got out of it. So it's definitely informed my practice.
I think it would be, and
Will
for me,
improve.
and for us in terms of thinking about what we do with our teachers next year, one of the things that I would, probably say to them all is, let's put a camera in your room, let's film yourself, and just go away and watch it. No one else has to see it, but you can have a look at it and go, oh, I didn't even realise I did that. That's a great thing that I do, and I don't even think about doing that, but I might change those two things, because, it's all very well for us all to sit there and watch someone else, but it's quite scary to watch yourself, but it's so clear when you can see yourself on camera that you can go, there's a few things that I'd change there.
Absolutely.
And, but at the same time, and not in a bad way either, just to go,
No.
you can see what the kids see every day.
And to learn it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
For
Yay!
fantastic